tested for celiac disease, have come back negative, but are still having issues with gluten? Hello, my successful and healthy earthlings. Mihaela Rogushi, a naturopath and founder of the Natural Health Podcast. In this episode today, I'm going to talk to you about all things non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And at the end of this episode, I'm going to give you an opportunity to join a health and success orange community by clicking below and joining the Natural Health newsletter. Welcome to the Natural Health Podcast, where we bring awareness of sustainable health in the business hustle space. Natural Health Podcast is perfect for the high-performing, business-minded individuals who want to work with their biochemistry to achieve success and optimal health. It's Wednesday, which means it's time for What Would I Do? In today's episode of the Natural Health Podcast, we discuss this week's question. All questions are kept confidential and I read and answer them as if it was me. Hence why it's called What Would I Do? The information provided is not to be taken as advice and is solely for information purposes only. I'm not here to cure, treat, or provide medical advice. I'm here to educate and inform you so you're able to take steps towards optimal health. Please discuss any medical issues with your healthcare professional. Let's get into today's question. Today's question is, I have done a celiac test and it's come back negative, but gluten still doesn't sit well with me. Why is this? What a great question. And this is not the first time I've got a question like this, so I thought I would dig deep into it and find a bit of research to back it up. So, what we're talking about here most likely is non-celiac wheat sensitivity, okay? So you've done a celiac test, you've come back negative, but gluten still affects you. So the ingestion of gluten has been linked to several clinical disorders, including celiac disease, wheat allergies, non-celiac gluten sensitivities, also known as NCGC. Celiac affects approximately 1.4% of the population based on these results. Right, on the studies, and approximately 0.7% of the population based on biopsy confirmed results. So it's not a large amount of individuals who are actually celiac, so less than 1% or so. So the people that you know about around you, out of the 100 people you know, one person is celiac and absolutely cannot have gluten. So this is talking about the United States here now. I'm not talking about Australia, but the United States specifically, approximately 1% of the population has celiac disease diagnosed. And I've mentioned this before, there's a lot of people who are in their 30s, sometimes even 40s, and they get diagnosed with celiac disease. So much damage has been already introduced to the body. So reports suggest up to 6% of the United States population may be affected by non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And this may be something that you're talking about, and it's definitely something to investigate, because the symptoms and symptoms, what they look like is, while potential antigens and biomarkers that may lead to the onset of non-celiac disease are still under investigation, they include a wide range of symptoms, including abdominal pain, bloating, altered bowel functions, diarrhea, constipation, headaches, fatigue, joint or bone pain, mood disorders, skin manifestations such as rashes or eczema. So people get migraines, headaches, right? So these are all the signs that you may get from these having sensitivity to, as that's non-celiac. These symptoms may occur within hours, sometimes even days following ingestion of gluten, and also they get better when you move gluten away, right? So while you're ingesting gluten, you may be getting abdominal pain and so forth, altered digestion. And once gluten is removed, even though you've been told that you're not celiac, things get better. And it's like, why? And that's the question that you have, right? Essentially, how do you have a clinical diagnosis of NCGS? It's categorized by the following: that you have done a celiac test, you've come back negative, and you've also done a wheat allergy and you've come back negative for that too. Intestinal and extraintestinal symptoms related to gluten ingestion. So you're having issues when you do ingest gluten. And it's also confirmed by gluten withdrawal and double-blind placebo challenges. So that's what it's confirmed with. And I can just imagine what happens in double-blind placebo challenges is that you get given a food that you don't know if it's gluten or not, or neither does the person that's giving it to you, and you see if you still have those symptoms. That's an interesting, very interesting way. So a study from the lab of famed clinical disease research Alessio Fanzo explored the effects of protein gliadin on the integrity of the intestinal barriers. Gliadin is a component of gluten that triggers the immune system response. So what happens is the researchers took a biopsy from 4 patients. The patients with celiac disease, patients with celiac in remission, patients with gluten sensitivity, and patients with no with no known gluten reactions. So those 4 types of individuals. In all the groups, intestinal permeability was significantly increased by exposure of gliadin, which is the protein found in gluten. Altered gut barrier function was specifically pronounced for those with active celiac disease and those with gluten sensitivity. So all of them had an effect to gluten. Okay, that's crazy. All of them had an altered gut barrier function, and especially with those who were celiacs and those with gluten sensitivity. So it's interesting that this is the study that's coming out. That doctor has posited that the autoimmune disease develops in the presence of 3 factors: genetic predisposition, environmental triggers, and internal permeability. If this research proves to be correct, eating gluten could increase the risk of autoimmune diseases in all patients who have genetic susceptibility, not just those with gluten tolerance, right? So there's so much research there in regards to non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So a 2018 review summarized that extraintestinal manifestation with these individuals is considered an immune system related disease and is linked to autoimmune diseases, which is hypnotized and investigated. One review found evidence that inner immunity activation may trigger the inflammatory response noted in NCGC clinical presentation based on the review. This is absolutely crazy. So now you kind of know that there is something out there that gluten can affect you even if you're not celiac. So the question that I have for you is, what happens when you eat gluten, right? What happens when you eat gluten? Have you tried removing gluten? And I mean completely remove gluten from your diet, because gluten is everywhere, right? Have you tried that? What happens when you have removed it? Do you get better? How long does it take to get better? Do you have Hashimoto's? Do you have any skin rashes? Do you have psoriasis? Any rheumatological diseases? Does anyone in your family have issues to gluten? Have you been tested for wheat allergies? All of these questions to ask yourself: what medication are you on? How's your gut microbe? How's your gut overall function? What signs and symptoms come up when you do eat gluten? This is one of the key ones. And if you've never tried to remove gluten, that's definitely something that'll be interesting to look into. So what would I do, right? What would I do is first, I'm guessing you've already done this, is test yourself for celiac, right? If that came back negative, test yourself for wheat allergies. If that come back negative, then you can actually go through the process of elimination and seeing if you can even get someone to so this is an interesting one, which is what they've spoken about, is get someone that gives like non-gluten bread and gluten bread, and then that person doesn't know which one's which. They give it to you and you eat it. Nothing else changes throughout the day. You eat it and then see what happens if you get those symptoms. If you get those symptoms just when you had the gluten bread, then you kind of know there's an issue there, right? Ensure that you have so what I would do is do that, but then also try going gluten-free, but completely gluten-free. There may be some issues with some people going gluten-free because you may not have enough fiber, protein, folate, iron, potassium, zinc, and so forth. Work with a professional. This is why it's key to work with a professional, because a lot of people go gluten-free and they may have mineral vitamin deficiencies, and this is where it's absolutely key for you to work with a health professional. Make sure and review your gut health. What is your gut health like? Is it on point? Are there issues with your gut health? What is happening right there with your gut health? Look, I hope that this sheds some light to your question, anyone listening who may have this issue. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at ᴅᴏᴇ.raguz on Instagram. I'll be more than happy to answer these questions on the Natural Health Podcast. Click below. There's a link that will guide you to a website that you can put in your question. Hopefully I'll be able to answer it. But I hope that this makes some sense if you do have some gluten issues. There's so many other factors that I didn't have time to talk about in regards to gluten, but this is definitely something to investigate. Do you have a non-celiac gluten sensitivity? Because it's not spoken about. It's not spoken about. If you're not celiac, then that's it, kind of. You should be eating gluten. But this is not spoken about, and this is, I hope I'm raising some awareness of this, and you're able to share this with your loved ones, and I hope it makes a little bit more sense for you. So there you have it. Do what you do best. Love, like, share the Natural Health Podcast. And remember, the missing link between failure and success is your health. content and information provided here is opinion of ᴄᴇʟɪᴛ and is for information purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. It is not intended to provide medical advice or take the place of medical advice or any current treatment you're undertaking. Consult your own medical professionals for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the Natural Health Podcast. It is advised that you consult your doctor or healthcare professional in relation to any health concerns you may be having. ᴄᴇʟɪᴛ does not take responsibility for any health consequences which occur from a person listening, viewing, or reading this content. Under no circumstances shall the Natural Health Podcast, ᴄᴇʟɪᴛ, any guests or contributors to the Natural Health Podcast, or any employees, associates, or affiliates of ᴄᴇʟɪᴛ be responsible for damages arising from the information provided on the Natural Health Podcast. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical conditions in either yourself or others. Please note, if you're taking prescription, do not stop your medication or start a new protocol, including but not limited to supplements, diet, lifestyle changes without consulting a doctor or healthcare professional. If you or any person has a medical concern, you should consult with your healthcare provider or seek other professional medical advice. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something that you have read or heard on the Natural Health Podcast or in any linked materials. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. Neither ᴄᴇʟɪᴛ nor the publisher of this content takes responsibility for the possible health consequences of any person or persons reading or listening or following the information in educational content.